for us to start asking that question. So as we leap into school year 21-22, we have often said Louisiana believes. So the slide that you see before you really speaks to our beliefs in action. We're stating our why. We are servant leaders who support all stakeholders to ensure students and educators have what they need to succeed. These are our values. We come from a very service-oriented place. We value the relationships that we've been able to build with our school system leaders and our educators and our families. We also value being responsible and accountable to you all, being transparent, and then also being authentic, as we know that you all are on the ground doing this work, and we are really here to support and serve your efforts. And then we also speak to our commitments. We are committed to having a collective impact with the funding that we have been afforded through the stimulus dollars. So from the state to the classroom, we want to demonstrate a collective impact. When we also think about our intentional efforts with making sure our students and our educators have what they need to be successful, we want to be outcomes driven, strategic, and priorities based in our planning. And then also item number 3 speaks to being transparent and accountable. A few weeks ago, we released our dashboard at the many stakeholders, but also it is an opportunity for us to demonstrate this effort around collective impact to our stakeholders in the use of our stimulus dollars. And so on our website, that fiscal dashboard is available. And again, it demonstrates this commitment to our stakeholders. As I mentioned earlier, we talked about you all being able to submit questions throughout this informational setting. There are 3 ways in which you can do that. Throughout this call, we will ask you all to submit questions utilizing the form. At this time, Danielle Mitchell, my colleague, has placed the link in the chat, and she's also placed the link for this presentation as well as the guidance and plan document in the chat. So again, 3 ways to submit question utilizing the link for the form. You can also utilize the chat feature for the webinar, as well as at the end of this call, we will give you the opportunity to unmute your mic and ask questions if you have questions at that time. So it is with great honor and after a lot of work that we're able to acknowledge that our Louisiana ARPA plan was actually approved on August 27th by the U.S. Department of Education. And so with that, we are very much intentionally focused on all of our students having a safe return to school, our support and sustained access to in-person instruction throughout the summer and into this school year. Our plan addresses the social, emotional, and mental well-being of not only our students, but our educators, and also making sure that we address the academic needs of our students due to the impact of the the pandemic. If you want to see more to see our plan, the link has also been added in the chat, and it is also on our website. Just to make sure that we all align on language relative to the academic recovery and acceleration plan, we want you all to understand that by completing this plan, you will satisfy 3 very important aspects of planning within our state. So demonstrating investment in the Louisiana Comeback Commitments. Many of you all have heard about the Louisiana Comeback Plan. We released initiative several weeks ago. As you complete this academic recovery and acceleration plan, you will see the applicable areas to the Louisiana Comeback Plan indicated by a blue check. The completion of this plan also satisfies federal requirements and prepare, and it's also preparing you all for federal reporting. So as you can look at the plan, you will see a yellow check, which indicates the completion of this section will actually satisfy that federal reporting requirement. And lastly, but certainly not least, we know that in our last legislative session, Act 294 was passed by our state legislators. With completing this plan, you will see sections that reference Act 294. So the completion of this plan allows you to meet the criteria for Act 294. You will see throughout and even throughout the guidance document a green check that actually indicate your satisfaction of completing Act 294. At this time, I will be joined by Danielle Mitchell to go over the master timeline and a few remaining technical aspects of completing our academic recovery and acceleration plan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Timmel. As she stated, we will kind of go over some of the more technical aspects of the academic recovery and acceleration plan. So on this slide, what you will see is actually an excerpt from our 2022-2023 school system planning guide that will be released this Friday during our school system planning launch. So if you have not already made adjustments to attend that, please do so. We will record it. And that's at 9 o'clock on Friday morning. The information was in the newsletter yesterday or today. That was released today. So you'll see the two items that are identified with a circle around them called the LEA plan. These are specific to the plan that we're discussing today. So as you all know, and what's been entered into the chat is the link to the resource library that contains not only the planning template, but the guidance document, the FAQ document, and this presentation that we're looking at today. So all of that information is in the library. The second date, or the second item that you see circled, is September 30th. This is when the plans that we're discussing today are due. This seems like a very tight turnaround, but I also want to put this into context. We know that many of our systems over the past several months have been developing multi-year budgets and multi-year plans. So the content that is going to be in the academic recovery and acceleration plan is largely what's already been decided upon and being entered into EGMS in the achieved budget already. What isn't being entered into the EGMS budget is the narrative about how school systems are really investing their funds to address the impacts of the pandemic, especially and particularly on our most vulnerable and under-resourced and underserved populations who we know had the greatest impacts from the pandemic. So you'll see that theme throughout being present in the plan and in the questions that you all are being asked. So this timeline is also driven by federal and state mandated timelines. The two main resources that we're going to discuss today, again, are the planning template and the guidance document. In the development of these resources, we created them in a way that they are they're formatted in very similar fashion to make for ease of use and reference. So they're both organized in 7 categories. And those 7 categories are, the first is needs assessment, attendance and well-being, recovery and acceleration, professional learning and development, early childhood education, school safety and operations, and then last is data infrastructure. And so as you go throughout utilizing and referencing the guidance document as you complete your planning template, you will see the dark purple containing the categories, and then the light purple containing the key investments, and so on and so forth. So we develop these in such a way that their formatting hopefully makes for ease of use for the user. Additionally, what you'll notice, as Dr. Timmel pointed out earlier, is there are color-coded check marks. Those color-coded check marks align with either federal reporting requirements, Act 294 satisfaction, or the Louisiana comeback commitments. Now we'll start to look at the specific components within the guidance document and how school systems can use each of those different sections to complete their plans. So the first one that we're going to look at is a response example. So we provided response examples for just the first section in the guidance document to give our school systems an idea of the type of information and the type of narrative response that we, not only as the SEA, will be looking for, but also our state and our federal agencies. So these are by no means and should not be taken as an indication of approval, so you can copy and paste and insert your own data. We would definitely be looking at, number one, your needs assessment and making sure that your answers or your responses really do speak to the needs of your students and educators. So we crafted these for the first section, which is attendance and well-being, and made that available to our school systems. Additionally, we just want to remind all of you that the budget and expenses, the investments, should align with the allowabilities for ESSER. So the next three sections that we're going to talk about within the guidance document are the approval criteria, investment examples, and then resources. So the approval criteria is what reviewers are going to use when they are reading your narrative responses. Think of this like a checklist. So they're going to go through each one of these items and look for whether or not in your response the information is being addressed adequately. There will be a section where the reviewer will be able to take notes, document any follow-up questions that they may need to have, and be able to communicate those revisions needed if necessary. The second part here is examples. So we know that many of you have already developed your budget or in the process of developing your budgets and getting ready to submit your formula dollar budgets for ESSER 2 and 3 on September 30th. The examples here are simply just that. It's just a limited list of potential expenses that a school system could incur associated with some of these key commitments. So again, by no means is this a comprehensive list. It's really just to start generating within our school systems examples or thoughts and ideas of how could they use these funds to support some of these key investments. And then of course, last is the resources. Many of you are very familiar with a lot of the resources that we put out in our school system planning guidance document, as well as Strong Start and various other avenues that we communicate to our school systems. So some of these resources will be very familiar, some will be new, and some you're also going to see again in our new school system planning guide that we're releasing on Friday. So these resources are just simply that, and a point of reference for our school systems as they need it. So last but not least is the submission process. How do you submit these plans? So the actual planning template is in a Word document format. In the Achieve application in EGMS, there is going to be a very specific place where the academic recovery and acceleration plans are going to be uploaded. Grants management, our grants management team is finalizing that build out right now. And so once we have kind of the screenshot of where exactly in the application that is, we will add it to this deck and update the link on our website so that you have that information readily available. Once school systems upload their plan, we're going to be asking them to essentially sign off on 4 assurances. The first one is that everything within their plan aligns to and adheres to their local and state board rules and regulations around pupil progression plans. Secondly, that the budgets are in compliance with local, state, and federal regulations. Third, that the evidence-based portion of the ESSER 3 funds is adhering to the evidence-based requirement with outlined in ESEA. And so how they define evidence-based is accessible through the link in this deck. Last but not least, that the LEA has collected and incorporated public input on this plan. And I'll just insert this caveat. We know that the submission of this exact plan is on a very tight timeline. So by no means is there this expectation to get this done in a week and then post it for 2 weeks and get all this public comments and feedback and then adjust it and have all of this done by September 30th. This plan is really a reflection of what we know our school systems have been doing for the past several months. And that includes getting public input and feedback on how they are going to invest all of their ESSER funds. So we know that several of our school systems have done various things in terms of posting, soliciting that input and feedback and incorporated that, and that will be reflected in the budgets being submitted. So this part of it is really the narrative, and together, both of those things will satisfy all of the requirements. And what we know federally in terms of end of the year reporting, the feds are going to be asking us as the SEA to collect from our LEAs. So with that, I know that we've gone through a lot of information, and the link to the FAQ submission form is included in the resource library. But at this time, we would like to open it up to questions. Feel free to unmute yourself, put your question directly in the chat, or submit it through the form. We want to be able to capture all questions so that we can use that to develop an FAQ document to support our school systems. But at this point, we will now pause, turn it over to questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go and look at the form and see if there's any questions that have been submitted. And Dr. Q and I will be available to answer those. So Dr. Timmel, there are a few questions that have been submitted. One of them is, can districts purchase community hotspots using ESSER 2 and 3 funding? Do you want me to answer? The answer is yes. You absolutely can. That's definitely an allowable expense. There's another allowability question, and the ARP ESSER allowabilities, I will place that link into the chat in just a moment. But those allowabilities are the same across ESSER 1, 2, and 3. And those have been the same that we've communicated in our Achieve Guidance document, as well as all of the other ESSER releases. So please reference that, but all of the allowability information is there. There is another allowabilities question, and I'll let Dr. Timmel kind of answer this and give some context around it. We are experiencing a large number of teacher vacancies. Can a district allocate funds to support non-certified teachers becoming certified and/or adding additional certifications in critical shortage areas?
Absolutely. I think we've addressed in the within the guidance document, also within allowabilities, that the same allowabilities are applicable. And I think we've even made recommendations that if you have teacher shortage areas via certification areas, that you can utilize this funding, again, to make sure that our students can recover academically. And so, yes, you are within the allowability to use these funds for teacher shortage areas. There's also another question in the chat, and that question is, will the deadline be extended due to recent events?
Yes, great question, and one that we absolutely understand and empathize with our school systems. So I do want to also clarify there are a couple of different timelines that we know our school systems are working against. This is one of them. The other timeline that is due this Friday is the return to school plan called Ready to Achieve. That actual timeline is going to be extended, and we are pushing that information out to school systems today. It's also going to be on our website. So that is the Ready to Achieve plan that was originally due in 2 days. This particular plan is in alignment with not only Act 294, but also federal requirements and timelines. Unfortunately, those timelines are not set by us, but it is actually in law that we have as the SEA to collect these plans from our LEAs by September 30th. With that being said, that is the initial submission. Over the course of October and November, we are going to have a review team that is going to be fully trained on reviewing these and providing feedback. So there is an opportunity for LEAs to have and make revisions to their plans and get feedback on their plans. And of course, LEAs are more than welcome to submit them beforehand, and our reviewers will begin reviewing them. But unfortunately, that due date of September 30th is not something that we have the ability to change. There's another question here about can there be categories that remain blank if ESSER funds are not being used for that category? So we know many of you, and something that we are fully supportive of, and not only do this here in action at the agency, but also encourage our school systems, and that's braiding funds. We believe in our priorities driving our spending and not the allowabilities of certain funds driving what we do. So with that being said, we know many school systems are using various funds to address learning loss and to help with the academic recovery of their students. This plan is very specific for how school systems are using their ESSER 2 and 3 formula dollars. Therefore, anything that you all are doing that's associated with academic recovery and acceleration that's not being funded by ESSER 2 or ESSER 3 should not necessarily be reflected in this plan. We want to be able to tie it back to the ESSER 2 and the ESSER 3 dollars and expenditures.
Now, the one thing that I would add to that is to make sure that as we address various commitments within this plan, is we definitely highlight those Act 294 indications to make sure that our systems are responding to those commitments that are specific to Act 294. I think that's really important because those are the parts of the plan that is documented in state law and requires us to review and approve those plans. So you want to make sure as a system that you are thoroughly addressing those commitments that are aligned to Act 294. One other thing that I would add, I'm sure there are additional questions, but one other thing that I would add is if you are looking for resources to help you support your written narrative, I would invite you to look at Louisiana's ARPA ESSER plan as a resource. Also, you can look at other state ARPA plans. And so those are probably resources that you can use to just look at how those narratives are written and how there's just a continual and an intentional way in which the needs assessment data is actually addressed within those narratives.
And just for reference, I did drop the link into the chat that takes you to Ed's website where they are posting approved state plans. So that is a resource, as Dr. Timmel said, that you can use and reference. And so with that, I see that we have about 1 minute remaining. And before I turn it over to Dr. Q to close, just as a reminder, if you do have questions once you get into it, and we know that many of our systems, that's really where the questions are going to come, we encourage you to send those and submit those through the form that's available on the website, or reaching out to ldoe.grantshelpdesk@la.gov, or emailing one of us. We are happy to serve and support you in any way that we can throughout this process. And thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Timmel.
Thanks, Danielle. Just in closing, I would just remind you all that this was really our attempt to eliminate our school systems from having to complete mini plans. As you see, there were 3 very specific requirements: the Louisiana comeback, federal requirements and federal reporting, and then also Act 294. With the, I think the emphasis for completing 3 different plans, we rolled it up into one plan, which is the Academic Recovery and Acceleration Plan. And so again, that was our attempt to eliminate systems from having to complete 3 individual plans. And so hopefully that is helpful to you all as a system. And then the resources that we've shared will also help you in completing the documents. And I would also say, pay close attention to the approval criteria so that you can generate your response to that narrative to help you complete your plan. Again, the link for adding questions will definitely be available, but you can always reach out to ldoe.grantshelpdesk@la.gov to submit your questions. We would just ask in the subject line that you indicate Academic Recovery and Acceleration Plan, so that those questions can be forwarded to our team so that we can respond quickly. Again, thank you for joining today.